In this lecture, we want to start with the design of our core layer, and we want to start with the dimension for the payment. So this is something that we can do first in the database management system, because we first want to see how we can really extract all of the information. And that's why we can use a distinct select. So we use select distinct, and we now want to use only the payment and also then the loyalty card. So with that, we get all of the different variations. So we want to query that, of course, from staging.sales. And if we execute that, we see all of the possible combinations. And we also see that we have, yes, 8 different values. So 4 for the payment and 2 different for the loyalty cards. So these would be all of the different combinations. And first we want to fix also those nulls, because in our case, this would mean that they didn't use a credit card, but they were just paying in cash. And that's why we want to replace all of the nulls with cash. We can do that in Postgres, so depending on what database management system you are using. But in Postgres, again, this is very simple in all of the database management systems, but in Postgres, it's coalesce function. So we can use that. We use the payment column, and if this one is null, so if this has no value, it's basically null, then we want to use cache. So this is basically how this coalesce function is working. And then, of course, we want to give this a name. Then we have the alias, and it should be again payment. This is the name. Don't forget the comma afterwards, and then we can see what the result is. Now cache is replaced. So these are the values that we would like to insert into our dimension payment. And note that also automatically, per default, this primary key will also be included. So we just need to paste in those values into payment and loyalty card, and then also the primary key will be generated automatically. This is because we have set up the table like this. And that's why with that code, we can now just implement our payment dimension. That's why I'm just going to copy that, and I'm heading over to Spoon. For that, of course, we now want to again create a new transformation. And in here, the first thing, we want to use insert table. So input table, and we find the table input in here. And we can again just paste this code in here. We can again preview to see if everything is indeed working. This is absolutely fine. And this is now basically a full load. So always the data will be loaded and checked if there are any additional values. So just this data that has been found, those options that are available will now be written into the core. And in our case, we of course just want to insert the payment type and if the customer has a loyalty card or not. And if there should be a new combination, this new combination should also be appended. That's why we can just use an update insert. So this will be something that is very simple. We just search for update insert. So we search update insert, and in here we now need to set this up properly. First, of course, the schema will be in our case directly into the core. Then the table will be dim payment. And also now we want to compare if there is a new payment type. So if in the target table payment already exists and also the exact same loyalty card. So if there is something that is already existing, then there should be no updates. Then there should be no updates. So this is why we can check this box. And if there should be then any new values, so a new combination of payment and loyalty card, it will be inserted. So this is how we would like to have it. And of course, then also the new key will be also automatically generated. So if there should be a new credit card type, it will be recognized and then it will be inserted. So this is how we want to set this up. And of course now also this one we want to save. So we can go again to save, and this should be then in our case called, we can call it core dim payment, and this is our transformation. So this will be now in our core job. And of course, later on, we also want to include that in a job for the core layer, so all of the transformation and loading. But before that, we first want to also create the transformation steps for our sales fact. So we want to read the data from staging, define our transformations so that we have the final fact table, and then this should be also loaded into our core layer. So that is what we are going to do in the next lecture. So in this lecture, we now want to set up the transforming and the loading for our sales fact. And that's why we of course want to first start with setting up a new transformation. And we first want to read the data as it is from the staging. But we want to also now plan our transformations. So our setting up for the different columns, and we can do that in our case in SQL. That's why I want to first go back into pgadmin. And again, similar to what we have done with the payment, we can also now already plan things with SQL because the data is available in the source in SQL, and that's why we can use very nice SQL transformations and then just query the data with these transformations already. And of course, again, you find in the resources this text file with the code included. So you can also just copy that, and we are going through this code step by step to understand what we have done here and how this works. So first we want to execute it, and then we see the data. So step by step we are going to understand now this code. Of course, first we want to select all of the columns that we want to have anyways. So this is transaction ID, transaction date, price, quantity, cost, all of the things that we want to have included, and this is something that we don't need to change. Of course, the things that we don't need, we can just leave out. For example, all of the payment values we will have included in the payment dimension, and we can also already see that this foreign key is now empty. And this is now because we have not set up the core for the dimension. Of course, we have set up the logic and the design in the ETL, but we have not executed that yet. That's why we first would like to go back and execute also this core dimension. So that's why we want to go to this transformation, we want to run it, and with that we also need to hope that things are working, and indeed we see that there is a problem. So this is why we need to go back and have a look at what is not working. First we want to see if there is something that we can see. No fields in row, can't insert. Let's see if there is some problem. And in here we should also get those update fields, and we don't need to update them. That's why we can just set them all to no. And now again we can try if it works now. So we run it again, and now indeed it works. So this was just a little technical thing that we should have changed. And now that we have that, we can go back to pgadmin, and we can now try again to execute this code. And now this payment should be working. So this payment foreign key, because now this payment dimension should exist. That's why I want to execute again. And if I do that, I see that the payment foreign key is there. I had to execute it twice, so maybe it just took a while to be updated. And now that we have that, we want to go also through the additional columns that need a little bit more attention. So first of all, we want to have a look at this extract column. So this is our foreign key for the date. And if we have a look, this is just using the year in the beginning. That's why we want to extract first the year. And then, since we want to have a real number, and we have afterwards 1, 2, 3, 4 additional digits, we multiply this with 10,000 to get those additional digits. So it's just a little trick. And afterwards, we want to include the month, and this should be now multiplied with 100 so that we get these 2 additional digits. And then these 2 additional digits, so the day should be then, we can see this is May 4th, and this 4 is then just included with the extraction of the day. So this is one example of how this can be done. Of course, then we have this foreign key from our product table. And this we get by joining the data. So this is what we have said. We use the product primary key from our product dimension, and we use that, or we get that, by joining the product dimension by using this natural key. So this is how we join, and this will then basically bring in this foreign key, and it will be the correct one because we have joined via this product ID key. And this is basically all that we need. So we have tested that in here, and now we can just bring it and set it up in our transformation. So that's why we want to bring in the table input, and we can just paste in that code. We can again preview if everything works as expected, and indeed it does work. Of course, now that we have that, we also need to set up these additional columns, and those we want to do in PDI. So this is something we can also do it, of course, in SQL, but we also want to see how it would work in PDI. That's why we want to make an additional calculation. We can search for calculator. We add it, and in here we can now just also enter our additional fields. So we want to start with the total price, and then in the calculation we want to use a multiplication. And in here we want to use as a first field the price. And the price should be multiplied with the quantity. And the value type we want to set as a number. And also precision, we can say, so how many decimal places should be calculated. We want to have the value 2. And then also the same thing for the total cost. Again, the same calculation, A multiplied with B, and then the cost should be multiplied with the quantity. And again, the data type is a number and 2 decimal places. So this can be also entered in here. And then we want to click on OK, and of course we can connect them, and now right click, preview, and then quick launch to verify if the result is correct. So this seems like it has worked very fine. So this is already great. Now the next thing is also that we want to calculate the profit. That's why we want to add a second calculator, and now we want to calculate the profit. And now the calculation is A minus B, where we want to first use the total price, and from that we want to subtract, of course, the total cost. Value type again is a number, and the precision is 2. So with that we have it correct, and we want to preview, quick launch, and see if the profit is correct. Indeed, it works fine, and it seems to have also correct values. So this is great. And now we have basically everything that we want to have. So we now only need to insert this data. And this is where again we would like to use an update insert. And we can again double click. So of course it is not really necessary usually in a fact table to have some updates, but still if it would be the case, we can also set this up and say if there is a primary key that has been there already, then this is an update, and then the values should be just updated. In our case, we want to, of course, just enter the target schema, which is the core, and then the table name is the sales table. And if we would like to have some updates, we can use the primary key, which is the transaction ID. So if this should be there already, we can then perform an update. So we want to search for, again, transaction ID, and then get all of the update fields. So of course the transaction ID does not need to be updated, and then we click on OK. And this is now our final transformation. Now we of course want to put things together and test everything if we put that together in a job. So that's what we want to do in the next lecture. We want to set up our core job with all of the transformations and the load. And then of course we want to also test things out in the end. So that's what we are doing in the next lecture. And now in this lecture, we want to put things together and also now create our job for all of these transformations and loadings. Of course, now with this transformation that we have created, we first want to save that so that the updated and correct version is then used in our job. And now we of course want to create a new job. And of course, we want to start with a start. And then afterwards, we want to include an additional transformation. And this first transformation will be for our product dimension. That's why we can call that also dim product. So the transformation we have created, and we have called this core dim product. Of course, we want to go to the correct location again. That's why I copy again the path, paste it, and then I want to search for core dim dimension. And this is available in here. We want to include it. And then afterwards, we also want to now add a second transformation. And this should be now for the fact sales. So I can just call that fact sales. And I want to include also the correct transformation. So we have called this core sales fact. We can search it and include it as well. And now we have this included. So this is basically everything that we have. We can now just also, of course, save that as a new job and then run it. So I immediately click on run, and of course it wants me to save it in a new job. So I can call it core job, save it, and then hopefully everything will work. And indeed, we at least have no errors. And now, of course, we also need to verify in our data warehouse if the data is now really available. So first, we want to select everything from our sales table. So this will be core sales. And we want to see if the data is there. And indeed, the data is there. So this is great. And everything also looks very nice. Perfect. Now we also want to verify if the dimension for the payment is also there. Select star from core dim payment. And then we also want to see, yes, the data is also there. So this is really nice. So this is now really great. And now that we have that, of course, we also would like to test how things work if we now don't want to perform a full load, but if also our delta load works. And that's why we want to also test that in the next lecture. And of course, we now also want to test the delta load. That's why we want to bring in some additional values in our source data that we have not loaded before. And then we want to test if also the delta load would work as we expected. That's why we first want to now load the data into our source. So we go to public, and in here we have, of course, our sales table. We can just add additional values by again right-clicking and then importing additional data. We can go to import, and of course again the file you will find again in the resources attached, so you can also just download them and then also do the import with me if you want. If we have set it to import, then you can go to file name, and in this case we want to select fact sales 2. And now, of course, the header is again included, the delimiter is again a comma. And now we want to click on OK, and we see this doesn't work. So in our case, we also need to add the columns manually because there's already data included. And we just use all of the columns that are there. So we have quantity and price. And now let's try again. We click on OK, and now it was successful. So now we can first have a look at the table. We can copy that and see if there is now really this new data included. So I query from the sales table. And if I scroll all the way down, I will see that there is now hopefully some new data. So previously we had only the last value, which was April, and now we have additional data. We can see that from 2022 in May is available in the source, but in the core layer, we can change it quickly, we will see that this data is not available. So if we again go all the way down, we see that this is only till the end of April. And that's why we can now test also the incremental load. And we remember that we have manually set the dummy value for our variable, which was 1st of January 1970. This is what we have done, set last load sales in this transformation. So we have set up this for the full load. But now we want to really get the correct value, so the maximum value from the last load date. So this is what we now want to activate. Again, click on preview to see if the value is correct. Indeed, now this is the maximum value that we expect. So now we can click on OK, and of course we need to also save it. And now we can just again execute. Of course we need to start with the staging. And then afterwards, we can also run the core again. So we see that the entire workflow would work. In fact, we can even create a new job that is using both the staging job and the core job. So it's kind of a parent job. And that's why we can search also for the job. We first need to start, then include the first job and then the second job. So this first job should be just the staging. And then we can again search for the staging job. We can again include all of that path. And then we search for staging job. This should be probably more at the bottom. Staging job. Okay. And then the next one would be, let's say, transform and load. And in here we want to search for the core job. That's why again we paste it and we search for core job. This is this one. And now hopefully we again have the moment where we want to test and see if all of that work has been worth it and we did no mistakes. So we can of course save it and we can say this is our complete ETL process. We save it. And we see at least there are no errors. So this is already very good. And now we also, of course, want to see if in the sales table there are now these additional values. So now we want to again scroll down all the way. And we see again that there are some mistakes. So this is happening also in real life. That's why we also want to see if we can fix that and find the problem. So it seems like that there is not the new data available, but this is just because of the ordering, and we can again just order by transaction ID, and we want to order in a descending order. So we want to see first the highest value, so the latest data, to see if this is available. And indeed, we see now also from May, this data from 2022 is also available. So this is now really nice, and we have now successfully tested our entire workflow. And from now on, we can just use this ETL to get the data from the data source, model it, and then with that all load it into our data warehouse. I know it was a little bit complicated and a lot of different steps, but anyways, I hope it was helpful, and we are now almost done with this entire course. So this is really great and a big milestone. So congratulations already on that. So hope to see you in the next section.